The stadium lights blazed down on 80,000 screaming fans as Manchester United faced their biggest rivals in the championship final. Among the crowd sat Marcus Thompson, a 24-year-old British soldier who had recently returned from his second tour in Afghanistan. His right leg still ached from the shrapnel wound he'd received 3 months earlier during a roadside bomb attack that had claimed 2 of his closest friends. Marcus had been looking forward to this match for weeks. Football had always been his escape, his way of forgetting the horrors he'd witnessed in the desert mountains of Helmand Province. His girlfriend Sarah sat beside him, her hand gently resting on his injured leg, understanding without words when the crowd's sudden movements made him tense up. The atmosphere was electric. Fans sang team songs, waved scarves above their heads, and painted their faces in team colors. Marcus tried to lose himself in the excitement, but something felt different today. His hands were shaking slightly, and not from the cold October evening. The loud noises, the sudden movements of people around him, the way shadows fell across the stadium. Everything seemed to trigger memories he'd worked hard to suppress. "You okay, love?" Sarah whispered, noticing his white knuckles as he gripped the armrest of his seat. "Yeah, just excited for the match," Marcus replied, forcing a smile. He didn't want to worry her. She'd already been through enough, visiting him in the military hospital, helping him through his physical therapy sessions, and dealing with his nightmares that came without warning. The first half of the game was intense. Both teams played aggressively, and the score remained tied at 1 goal each. During halftime, Marcus excused himself to get some fresh air. Walking through the stadium concourse, he passed groups of celebrating fans, vendors selling hot dogs and beer, and families with young children wearing oversized jerseys. As he stood outside, breathing deeply, Marcus noticed a group of teenagers nearby setting off small fireworks to celebrate. The first small pop made him flinch. The second one sent him diving behind a concrete pillar, his heart racing, sweat immediately covering his forehead. In his mind, he wasn't a football stadium anymore. He was back in that dusty village, hearing the whistle of incoming mortar rounds, watching his friend Jimmy collapse as blood spread across his uniform. "Sir, are you all right?" A concerned security guard approached Marcus, who was crouched behind the pillar, breathing heavily and scanning the area for threats that existed only in his memory. Marcus stood up slowly, embarrassed. "Sorry, just felt a bit sick." The crowd, the security guard, a middle-aged man named Dave who had seen many veterans struggle with similar issues, nodded understandingly. "Take your time, son. There's no rush." Marcus returned to his seat just as the second half began. Sarah squeezed his hand as he sat down, not asking questions, but letting him know she was there. The crowd around them continued to cheer and sing, but Marcus found it harder and harder to focus on the game. Every sudden movement in his peripheral vision made him turn his head sharply. Every loud cheer made his muscles tense. The game grew more exciting as both teams fought desperately for the winning goal. In the 78th minute, Manchester United scored, and the stadium erupted. 80,000 people jumped to their feet simultaneously, screaming with joy. Strangers hugged each other, beer flew through the air, and the noise was deafening. Marcus felt the walls closing in. The cheering crowd around him began to blur together. He was no longer seeing football fans celebrating. His mind was showing him crowds of angry villagers, gunfire, explosions, chaos. His breathing became rapid and shallow. His vision started to tunnel. Marcus, look at me," Sarah was saying, but her voice seemed to come from far away. He tried to stand up, but felt dizzy. The celebration continued around him, completely unaware that one of their own was fighting a different kind of battle. Marcus gripped the seat in front of him, trying to ground himself in reality, try to remember where he was and when he was. The crowd's celebration grew louder as replays of the goal showed on the giant screens around the stadium. Fireworks exploded outside the stadium in the distance, and Marcus finally lost his grip on the present moment completely. Marcus collapsed in his seat, his body shaking uncontrollably. In his mind, he was no longer at Old Trafford Stadium. Instead, he was back in that terrible day in Afghanistan when everything went wrong. The celebrating crowd around him had transformed into the chaos of war in his traumatized memory. Sarah immediately knew something was seriously wrong. She had read about this in the pamphlets the military hospital had given her. Post-traumatic stress disorder could strike without warning, triggered by unexpected sounds, smells, or situations. She wrapped her arms around Marcus protectively, speaking softly to him while gesturing frantically for help. "Marcus, you're in Manchester. You're at the football match with me, Sarah. You're safe. You're home," she repeated gently, but Marcus couldn't hear her. His breathing was so rapid he was starting to hyperventilate. The fans sitting near them began to notice something was wrong. A few looked annoyed at first, thinking Marcus was just drunk and causing a scene during their moment of celebration. But when they saw Sarah's worried face and realized Marcus was in genuine distress, their attitudes quickly changed. "Should we call for help?" asked an elderly man sitting behind them. "Please, yes," Sarah replied without taking her eyes off Marcus. "He's a soldier. He's having some kind of episode." Within moments, several people were trying to help. Someone brought water. Another person cleared space around Marcus's seat so he wouldn't feel crowded. A woman who identified herself as a nurse knelt beside them and began checking Marcus's pulse and breathing. "He's having a panic attack," the nurse explained to Sarah. "We need to get him somewhere quiet and help him calm down." But Marcus wasn't just having a panic attack. He was experiencing a full flashback. In his mind, he was 8,000 miles away and 3 months in the past. He could smell the dust and smoke, hear the screams of his wounded friends, feel the burning pain in his leg where the shrapnel had torn through his muscle and bone. "Jimmy, Jimmy, stay with me," Marcus suddenly shouted, reaching out as if trying to grab someone. The people around him looked confused and concerned, but Sarah understood. Jimmy was Marcus's best friend who had died in that same explosion. Stadium security arrived quickly after being alerted by the fans. 2 guards in bright yellow vests pushed through the crowd, expecting to deal with a drunk or disorderly fan. Instead, they found Marcus surrounded by concerned people, clearly in the middle of a severe psychological crisis. "What's the situation here?" asked the lead security guard, a tall man named Robert who had worked stadium security for 15 years. "He's a soldier," Sarah explained quickly. "He served in Afghanistan. I think he's having flashbacks." Robert's expression immediately changed. His own brother had served in Iraq and had struggled with similar issues. "Okay, we need to get him out of here. The noise and crowds will only make it worse." The problem was that Marcus was still trapped in his memories and couldn't understand what was happening around him. When the security guards tried to help him stand, he reacted as if they were enemy soldiers trying to capture him. "Get away from me," Marcus shouted, pushing Robert away with surprising strength despite his distressed state. "I won't leave my men behind." The situation was becoming more difficult. Other fans were starting to stare and point. Some were recording with their phones, which made Sarah angry and protective. This was her boyfriend's most vulnerable moment, and strangers were treating it like entertainment. "Please stop recording," she pleaded with the phone-wielding fans. "He needs help, not publicity." Most people put their phones away, embarrassed by their behavior once they understood the seriousness of the situation. But the delay was making things worse for Marcus, who was becoming more agitated and confused. The nurse who had been helping suggested they try a different approach. "Don't try to move him yet," she advised the security guards. "Let me try to talk him through it first." She knelt directly in front of Marcus, speaking in a calm, steady voice. "Soldier, you're safe now. The mission is over. Your friends are safe. You did your job well." For a moment, Marcus's wild eyes focused on her face. The nurse continued speaking in the same authoritative but caring tone. "You're at base camp now. The medics have taken care of everyone. You can rest." This approach seemed to work better. Marcus's breathing began to slow slightly, and he stopped trying to fight off the people around him. But he was still not fully present or aware of his actual surroundings. Meanwhile, the football match continued on the field below. Most fans were completely unaware of the drama unfolding in their section. The stadium announcer was praising the goal scorer, while Marcus fought his private war with memories that refused to stay buried. The security team made the decision to carefully escort Marcus out of the stadium, with Sarah and the volunteer nurse accompanying them. They moved slowly, constantly reassuring Marcus that he was safe and among friends. The security team carefully guided Marcus through the stadium corridors toward the first aid station. His breathing was still irregular, and he kept looking around frantically, occasionally calling out names of soldiers who weren't there. Sarah walked beside him, holding his hand and speaking softly, while the volunteer nurse monitored his condition. "This is Robert to control room," the head security guard spoke into his radio. "We have a medical emergency in Section 15. Military veteran experiencing severe distress. Requesting ambulance to Gate 7. The stadium's first aid station was a small but well-equipped room beneath the stands. Dr. Emma Collins, the on-duty medical officer, was waiting for them when they arrived. She had treated various emergencies over her years working football matches, broken bones, heart attacks, even a few childbirth situations, but she had never dealt with a combat veteran having flashbacks. "What can you tell me about his condition?" Dr. Collins asked Sarah while examining Marcus, who was now sitting on a medical bed but still appeared confused and frightened. "He served 2 tours in Afghanistan," Sarah explained, her voice shaking with worry. "He was wounded 3 months ago in a bomb attack. 2 of his friends died. He's been doing okay mostly, but loud noises and crowds sometimes set him off." Dr. Collins nodded professionally while checking Marcus's vital signs. His heart rate was extremely elevated, and he was sweating profusely despite the cool temperature. She had read about post-traumatic stress disorder in her medical training, but seeing it firsthand was different than studying it in textbooks. "Marcus, can you hear me?" "Dr. Collins spoke directly to him. "You're in a medical facility. You're safe. Can you tell me what year it is?" Marcus looked at her with confusion. "The radio's not working. We need a call for backup. There are civilians trapped in that building." He was still experiencing the flashback, believing he was back in Afghanistan trying to coordinate a rescue mission. Sarah began crying quietly. Seeing the man she loved trapped in such painful memories was heartbreaking. The volunteer nurse, whose name was Janet, put a comforting arm around Sarah's shoulders. "This isn't uncommon," Janet whispered to Sarah. "My husband went through something similar when he returned from Bosnia. With proper help, Marcus can recover from this episode." Dr. Collins made the decision to administer a mild sedative to help calm Marcus's nervous system. "This will help reduce his anxiety and hopefully bring him back to the present," she explained to Sarah. Outside the first aid station, news of the incident was beginning to spread through the stadium. Robert, the security chief, was dealing with questions from stadium management and trying to coordinate with the ambulance crew that was now en route. "Sir, should we make any announcement to the crowd?" asked one of the stadium managers. "Some fans are asking questions about what happened." Robert shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. This is a private medical matter. We protect this young man's dignity and privacy." Meanwhile, back on the field, the football match was reaching its climax. With only 10 minutes left in the game, both teams were fighting desperately for a second goal that could determine the championship. The crowd was more energetic than ever, completely unaware of the human drama happening just beneath their feet. As the sedative began to take effect, Marcus's breathing slowly normalized. The wild, frightened look in his eyes began to fade, replaced by confusion about where he was and what had happened. "Sarah," he said weakly, recognizing her face for the first time since the episode began. Where are we?" Relief flooded Sarah's face. "We're at the stadium, love. You had an episode. But you're okay now. You're safe." Marcus looked around the first aid station, trying to piece together what had happened. He could hear the distant roar of the crowd above them, and slowly began to remember they had been watching the football match. Did I cause a scene?" he asked, embarrassment coloring his voice. This was his greatest fear, that his war experiences would humiliate him in public and burden the people he cared about. "You couldn't help it," Sarah said firmly. "No one blames you for anything. Everyone was just concerned and wanted to help." Dr. Collins approached with a clipboard and a gentle smile. Marcus, how are you feeling now? Any chest pain or difficulty breathing? Better, thank you, Marcus replied, though he still felt shaky and confused. I'm sorry for whatever trouble I caused. You didn't cause any trouble, Dr. Collins assured him. You had a medical episode, just like someone might have an asthma attack or a seizure. It's not your fault. The ambulance crew arrived and consulted with Dr. Collins about Marcus's condition. The lead paramedic, an experienced woman named Lisa, had dealt with several similar cases involving veterans returning from recent conflicts. We recommend taking him to the hospital for observation, Lisa told Sarah. Not because anything's seriously wrong, but because episodes this severe should be monitored by mental health professionals. Marcus wanted to refuse. He felt embarrassed and just wanted to go home and pretend this had never happened. But Sarah and Dr. Collins convinced him that proper medical follow-up was important for his long-term recovery. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, an unexpected visitor appeared at the first aid station door. It was Dave, the security guard who had first noticed Marcus's distress during halftime. He was holding something in his hands. Dave knocked gently on the first aid station door, holding a Manchester United team scarf in his weathered hands. Excuse me, is this the young soldier who is having difficulties? Dr. Collins looked to Marcus and Sarah for permission before nodding to Dave. The older security guard entered the room with a respectful, understanding expression. Son, I wanted you to have this, Dave said, extending the scarf toward Marcus. It belonged to my boy, Michael. He served with the Royal Marines in Afghanistan. Died in Helmand Province 2 years ago. The room fell silent. Marcus looked at the scarf, then at Dave's kind but sad eyes. Sir, I can't take something that belonged to your son. He would have wanted another soldier to have it, Dave insisted gently. Michael loved Manchester United as much as he loved serving his country. He would have understood what you went through today. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes as she watched this unexpected act of kindness. Dave continued speaking, his voice steady but emotional. After Michael died, I learned a lot about what you lads go through over there. The things you see, the friends you lose, the way normal life can feel strange when you come home. You've got nothing to be ashamed of. Marcus accepted the scarf with trembling hands. Thank you. I'm sorry about Michael. He knew the risks when he signed up, just like you did, Dave replied. The country asked you boys to do an impossible job in an impossible place. Some of you came home with wounds people can see, and some came home with wounds people can't see. Both kinds are real. As they spoke, the crowd, noise above them suddenly intensified. The match had just ended, and Manchester United had won the championship. 80,000 fans were celebrating wildly, but the sound no longer triggered Marcus's anxiety. The medication was helping, and Dave's understanding presence provided a different kind of healing. The ambulance crew was ready to transport Marcus to the hospital, but first they had to navigate through the crowds of celebrating fans leaving the stadium. Lisa, the lead paramedic, coordinated with stadium security to find the clearest route to the ambulance. We'll take him out through the staff exit, Robert explained. It'll be quieter and more private. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Collins pulled Sarah aside. I'm going to give you some information about support services for military families, she said quietly. What happened today was serious, but it's also treatable. There are specialists who work specifically with combat veterans. Sarah nodded gratefully, taking the pamphlets Dr. Collins offered. She had been trying to help Marcus on her own, but she was beginning to understand that professional help might be necessary. The journey through the stadium corridors was surreal. They passed celebrating fans, singing team songs, families taking photos with their children, and vendors cleaning up from the biggest match of the year. Meanwhile, Marcus was being wheeled toward an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket and wearing a dead soldier's scarf. Outside the stadium, the ambulance was parked away from the main crowd. Street vendors were selling celebration merchandise to happy fans streaming out of the exits. Police officers directed traffic, while mounted officers kept watch over the generally good-natured crowd. As they loaded Marcus into the ambulance, something unexpected happened. Several fans who had been sitting near them during the match appeared in the parking area. They had been asking security guards about Marcus's condition and had waited to see if they could help. "Is he going to be all right?" asked the elderly man who had been sitting behind them. Janet, the volunteer nurse, answered for the group. "He'll be fine. He just needs proper medical attention. We wanted him to know that we're thinking of him," said a middle-aged woman, holding a get-well card that several fans had quickly signed. "What he did for our country, we don't take that lightly." Sarah was amazed by the kindness of these strangers. In a world that often seemed divided and uncaring, these football fans had shown genuine concern for someone they had never met before today. "Thank you all so much," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "This means more than you know." As the ambulance prepared to leave, Dave, the security guard, approached the vehicle one more time. "Son," he called to Marcus through the open door, "when you're feeling better, come back to a match. Michael would have wanted you to enjoy football again." Marcus nodded, unable to speak because of the emotions overwhelming him. The ambulance pulled away from the stadium with its lights flashing, but no siren. This wasn't a medical emergency anymore, just a precautionary trip to ensure Marcus received proper care. Inside the ambulance, Lisa, the paramedic, monitored Marcus's vital signs while Sarah held his hand. His heart rate was nearly normal now, and the confusion had mostly cleared from his eyes. "How do you feel about what happened back there?" Sarah asked gently. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Dave's story, the kindness of strangers, and the realization that his struggles were not unique or shameful. "Scared," he answered honestly, "but also, I don't know, maybe not as alone as I thought." The hospital emergency department was surprisingly quiet for a Saturday evening. Most of the usual weekend injuries wouldn't arrive until later when the pubs closed. Dr. Patricia Williams, a psychiatrist specializing in trauma, had been called in specifically to evaluate Marcus. "Good evening, Marcus," Dr. Williams said warmly as she entered the examination room. "I understand you've had a difficult day." Marcus was sitting upright on the hospital bed, looking much more alert than he had at the stadium. The medication had worn off, and he was feeling embarrassed about the entire situation. "I'm fine now, doctor. I think everyone's making too big a deal of this." Dr. Williams smiled knowingly. She had heard this response from dozens of combat veterans. "Marcus, what you experienced today is called a flashback episode. It's a common symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Over the next hour, Dr. Williams conducted a thorough assessment of Marcus's mental state. She asked about his sleep patterns, his nightmares, his relationships, and how he had been coping since returning from Afghanistan. "Had you been avoiding certain activities or places since you came home?" she asked. Marcus was reluctant to admit it, but the truth was he had been avoiding many things. Crowded places, loud noises, action movies, even some old friends who wanted to hear war stories he wasn't ready to share. "I just want to move on with my life," Marcus said. "I don't want to be defined by what happened over there." "Moving forward is exactly what we want to help you do," Dr. Williams replied. "But sometimes we need to properly address our experiences before we can truly move past them." Meanwhile, Sarah was in the waiting room, calling Marcus's parents to explain what had happened. His mother, Helen, was worried but not entirely surprised. She had noticed changes in her son since he returned home, but like many military families, she hadn't known how to address them. "We'll drive down first thing tomorrow," Helen told Sarah over the phone. "Is there anything specific we should know?" "The doctor says it's treatable," Sarah replied. "Marcus just needs to accept that he needs help." Back in the examination room, Dr. Williams was explaining treatment options to Marcus. "We have an excellent program for combat veterans," she said. "It includes individual counseling, group therapy with other soldiers who've had similar experiences, and techniques for managing flashbacks and anxiety." "Group therapy?" Marcus asked skeptically. "Sitting around talking about feelings with a bunch of strangers?" "Actually, it's sitting around talking with people who understand exactly what you've been through," Dr. Williams corrected. "Some of our best success stories come from veterans who initially resisted the group sessions." Dr. Williams told Marcus about David, a Royal Marine who had struggled with severe PTSD after losing his leg in an IED explosion. Through treatment, David had not only recovered but had become a counselor himself, helping other veterans navigate their healing journey. The difference between soldiers who recover and those who continue to struggle often comes down to one thing, Dr. Williams explained. Accepting that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but another form of courage. As the evening wore on, Marcus began to open up more about his experiences. He told Dr. Williams about the guilt he felt for surviving when Jimmy and Peter had died. He described the hypervigilance that made him exhausted even when doing simple tasks like grocery shopping. He admitted that he sometimes felt like a stranger to himself and everyone around him. These are all normal responses to abnormal experiences, Dr. Williams assured him. Your brain is trying to protect you, but it's using techniques that work in a war zone but don't work in civilian life. The turning point came when Dr. Williams showed Marcus statistics about military suicide rates and untreated PTSD. The numbers were shocking and sobering. Without treatment, these symptoms often get worse, not better, she said gently. Many soldiers who refuse help end up losing their relationships, their jobs, and sometimes their lives. Marcus thought about Sarah, about the patient way she had dealt with his nightmares and mood swings. He thought about his parents, who deserved to have their son truly come home from war. He thought about Dave's son Michael, who would never have the chance to recover from anything. Okay, Marcus said finally. What I need to do? Dr. Williams smiled. The first step is recognizing that you deserve to heal. The second step is showing up for your first appointment. They scheduled Marcus for an intake appointment the following Tuesday. Dr. Williams also gave him techniques for managing anxiety and flashbacks if they occurred before treatment began. Remember, she said as they concluded the session, what happened today at the stadium doesn't define you. How you respond to it from here forward, that's what matters. Sarah was allowed to join them for the final part of the consultation. Dr. Williams explained how family members could support veterans in recovery, and she gave Sarah resources for dealing with her own stress and concerns. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish, Dr. Williams told Sarah. It's necessary. Marcus will need you to be strong and healthy as he works through this process. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Marcus reflected on the strange events of the day. He had gone to a football match hoping to enjoy a normal evening and instead had experienced one of the worst episodes since returning home. But he was also leaving with more hope than he had felt in months. In the taxi ride home, Marcus held Dave's scarf in his hands. I want to get better, he told Sarah. Not just for me, but for everyone who's been affected by this. You will get better, Sarah replied confidently. And when you do, maybe you can help other soldiers the way that security guard helped you today. 3 weeks later, Marcus attended his first group therapy session. 6 months later, he was leading support groups for newly returned veterans. A year later, he returned to Old Trafford Stadium, not as a patient being removed by security, but as a volunteer working with a charity that provided mental health support for military personnel. The wounded soldier had indeed been removed from the crowd that day, but he had returned as a healer.